You are listening to MadEarth Podcast, a broadcast that will bring anything connected from the land. Brought to you by Pirate Studio. Good evening, everyone. Once again, this is Jerry Alida, your host for today, and welcome to our fifth episode of Mad Earth Podcast. And tonight we get some guests, a friend, a comrade that is located in Florida. Ever right?
Yeah, in Florida.
All right. So welcome, Michelle, to Mad Earth Podcast. Can you please introduce yourself? So our audience will be have some knowledge or information about you, a little information about you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me tonight, Ja. I'm excited and nervous. But yeah, my name is Michelle, and right now I am in Florida, which is Seminole and Miccosukee territory. I'm originally from Colombia. So I was, born in Colombia and grew up there, and then migrated to the United States. And then ever since being in the United States, of course, I just been involved with different struggles and movement, right? I sometimes I like to say that I'm like a bird because I just like to learn from just like different spaces and just meet different people, right, in the movement. So I'm, gathering information here and there. And my intersections is, as I said, like being a migrant in the United States, queer, and yeah, that's and again, like just being involved in like different struggles locally as well as internationally.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for that
Mhm.
great introduction. By the way, I'm so excited to Michelle. Okay, and don't get nervous. I don't mean any harm. Okay, I'm just gonna ask you a few questions because
Yeah.
I'm really excited. I really want to know more about this topic that we choose. Okay, so but anyway, you said you've been involved with different struggles and movements. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that you start your struggles, involving your struggles and movements in Colombia or in already in the United States?
In the US, yeah. So when I left Colombia, I was still little, but you could say, right, that lived experiences, just like being in Colombia, and there's always, of course, like class issues, class challenges, and everything that comes with, like being colonized, right? And then like coming to the United States and just like really seeing like this is the belly of the beast, and just like starting to see like all the injustices, right? And again with like lived experiences, just kind of seeing like my family, like struggle and all these things. And like we're in the South, we're in Florida, so there's still a lot of things happening. But here in Florida, I just been like involved in different things, right? Like anything from like voting to like direct action to like housing, some reproductive rights. I did a lot of also like climate work. That's been a huge point in my life. So yeah, so just like a lot of climate work. um and then like recently, right, like internationally, just moving more towards like the solidarity work. So I was in Guatemala for 6 months or so. um yeah, doing work with indigenous communities and yeah, just being in that solidarity framework.
Huh? Impressive, impressive. It sounds like you're doing a lot of groundworks, and that's very interesting. And okay, so anyway,
Mhm.
I know to myself that I should love myself, and I'm trying to be radical somehow. But I'd like to ask you because our topic for today is about radical self-love. Is that right?
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Michelle, I would like to I would like to open this topic tonight. So can you tell me more about what is your perspective about this radical self love? Can you explain something to me? What is your perspective and where are you coming from this from this perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. And I think there's so many layers to this question, right? But as I was kind of just like organizing my thoughts, I get this message from one of my friends, one of my community friends, and it was so good. And so I'll just like read it to you. If you organize in a way that kills you, you will build a world that will kill you. Right. So,
Mm-hmm. Makes
when I
sense.
think of, yeah, right. Like when I think of like radical self love, especially in movement, we're fighting like against so many things, right? Like these systems, capitalism, colonialism, like all these things, right? We're like being attacked. The land is being attacked every day. And, like one of the layers here that we've been attacked, right? The system that is constantly attacking us is through weaponizing our bodies, right? So there's a whole like industry to that has been happening. And for example, in Colombia, like this is very common where the industry is very Eurocentric, right? Like when we talk, for example, about like beauty standards or like size or shape, like everything is Eurocentric, right? And this has created like so much trauma to our bodies, like so much hatred, like I see it, in with my peoples in Colombia, just everyone like trying to be something that they're being shown because they make you feel like you're wrong, like your body is wrong, like the way that you look is wrong, right? And so that's just like a tiny portion, right? Because then we get to like gender and class and race. We know how that goes, right? But this is obviously like part of the colonization project. So that's one aspect. And then just kind of navigating movement spaces, I've also come to see just how obviously we're all carrying trauma, and how there's also like conflict in our movements. Like there's so much, right, that sometimes we get violent with each other, right? And what I've come to understand is part of like radical self-love is like understanding our traumas, right? Like understanding why we're reacting the way we do, understanding why like how we react, um understanding like our boundaries, like all these things that eventually, right, like once we do, like to me, when I hear radical self-love, I also hear healing, like healing ourselves, right? Like that's the pathway to healing, or one of the pathways to healing. And like the way that I see these, the way that we see our work, especially with land work and like earth work, is that we're also healing the relationship with the earth. And I think to heal the relationship with the earth and each other, we have to heal the relationship with ourselves. um so that's a little bit of how I understand like radical self-love. There's so many layers to this, and I'm trying to like organize my thoughts, but yeah, that's what I'll say for now.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Michelle. Well, um y- I totally get the point, but I have a lot of question right now because you said, the system is attacking us, weaponizing our body. What do you mean by that, by the way?
Yeah, media, the messages that we get in the media, for example. So I was giving the example of Colombia,
Mm-hmm.
and the media in Colombia, right, is just like very violent in the way that, for example, like little girls, what they're seeing is this very, sometimes, yeah, a lot of the times like sexualized bodies, right, that don't look like them, bodies that are white, right? That are, that are Eurocentric. So you have, since you're little, you have little girls, little boys, and little people just having like these images in the media, right? To make us like hate ourselves, basically. So there's this like huge phenomenon in Colombia where you have 15-year-olds like getting plastic surgery. And that's a whole industry, right? Like we're the biggest industry in the entire world. So, like weaponizing our bodies, and then, right, and then involving capitalism, right? Like selling us these products to tell us that if you look this way, if you use this product, then you're gonna be lovable, right? Like, so you're gonna be acceptable. Um, and that's in the context of Colombia, right? And another context here in the US that I also hear from Black women is about hair, right? Like black hair and size and like all these things that also, like, all these standards come from colonization. So one of the people that I love to listen is Sonia Renee Taylor, and she has this book called The Body Is Not an Apology, where she deconstructs like all these things around like loving ourselves as we are, and that actually, like, that in itself is like radical. Like you're changing like the system, once you start on that path, and like you realize that we like get all these attacks like every day. um Radical self-love, like it's liberation, it's like personal liberation. So like that's one layer, right, of how it's understood. But I did want to touch on another layer. Let me see, I'm looking at my notes. So another person that I listened to, kind of on this like radical self-love path, her name is Lorena Camnau, and she's a Mayan indigenous woman. Um, and she is really interesting because while in Guatemala, I kind of got to understand this a little bit more, how the struggles for the land, right? There's also an intersection with our bodies. So they have this saying where, the saying is like, we're defendiendo la tierra, el cuerpo, y el territorio. We're defending the earth, the body, and the territory. And she talks about how like the first territory that we're defending is our bodies. And when she said that, I was like, my brain just exploded. Because it's like I understood this, right? But obviously from the indigenous feminist perspective, it was just like so amazing to hear. She also talks about, like their struggles of defending the land, again, like against corporations and, the government and like genocide and all these things, right? But then while defending the land, also experiencing, like gender violence and sexual violence, right, in their communities, right? So that's also like, as I understand it, and as I'm learning this, where, the first like territories that we're defending is our bodies.
Okay. That's really wonderful. Okay. And I totally agree. I have some good articulation tonight that, yeah, our bodies are our first territory. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, our body is only part of the land.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, yeah, defending the earth, the body and the territory, but the first territory is our body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really make a lot of sense to me. Thank you so much for sharing that, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, anyway, at the same time, I just want to share something that, Philippines or archipelago, we've been colonized for so many decades, okay? And I do believe
Mm-hmm.
we are on the same page, we are in the same context, somehow. And
Mm-hmm.
I do agree on, on the things that you said, earlier, that, this, the weaponizing our body, the beauty standards. I do believe, I can say it is, it is only a product of marketing, because,
Mm-hmm.
the capital system is all about,
Mm-hmm.
dictating, something's good and what is bad for you. So that way
Mm-hmm.
they can sell those products. Okay, so at the same time, I think it is really important that the existing system that we have right now is all about dictating, uh, and putting some standards. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and I do believe it is really important that we should be aware that we should not allow this system to control us. And yeah, just like you said, radical self-love is, I think something connected there. But I have a lot of question for you, because I just want to clarify something
Mm-hmm.
about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, you said that it's radical self-love is all about understanding our traumas and how we react, and healing is really something important. So anyway, can you tell me, I do believe there's a lot of traumas, but can you tell me more about, can you be more specific, what is the traumas that we need to understand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. I feel like it's layers, you
Okay.
know? Like I just the way I understand it, I just talked about the physical layer, right? Which I think has gave way to part of it has given way to like trauma, right? So we go to like the emotional and the mental layer of of how the system is impacting us, right? So like in this journey of healing, um right, like it's also taking care of that, and again, it's like everything is so layered, because then we also talk about access. Not everyone has access to mental health, or at least how we understand like mental health here, in the United States. Because I also know, obviously, like different like understandings of mental health that also includes nature, obviously, right? Like nature, it's the first healer. um so mental health is another layer, right? And for example, yeah, and then you take that layer, and then you go into the emotional, right? Like how are you doing emotionally, and like what's hurting you and what's bothering you. And then I think, to me personally, once you like keep going to the layers, I think it's like going back to your essence, whatever you want to call that, right? Like your essence as a person and as a being that, as you said, belongs to the earth. um so like I think like the premise of radical self-love is we all have a definition of that according to how we feel that we're healed, right? Like whatever we want to heal, whatever is going to heal us, that like we're in this process of healing, that then at least for me, like healing and like loving myself exactly as I am today, right? Like just as I am today, which is hard, right? Like sometimes with all these like years of conditioning, then I find that it's building like more capacity for me, right? Like doing this healing and this radical self-love is building capacity, mental capacity, emotional capacity, also physical capacity, to how I show up in the struggle, right? To understanding like also my place, right? One of the things that I like been healing lately is also like my identity, right?
Mhm.
Like in some ways, experiencing like xenophobia and all these things like queer phobia and different things, right? Like being an immigrant. But then on the other hand, also like experiencing privileges, you know, like being in the United States, right? And having to access to certain things, right? Like being the color of my skin, right? Like I'm benefiting, right? So, it's also like been a journey of how do I balance that? Because yeah, I think like once you know yourself, then I talk about like how you're showing up in the movement and the spaces. And I say that because, again, I also think that it has to do with the way that sometimes our trauma, interacts, especially when there's like high pressure, right? Like we're going against this system, our trauma is going to interact, right? And I also see, conflict, and sometimes we don't know how to deal with that conflict, right?
Mhm.
And I think for me, like being on this journey of healing has taught me, for example, how to rest, because we also have like this notion of, it's like internalized capitalism that you have to like go, 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 go. And we feel guilty about resting, right? And I know there's like so much against us, and like there's so much to defend. But at the same time, if we're not resting, right? Like we go back to that quote that I read in the beginning. We're organizing in a way that is killing us, then we're building a world that is gonna kill us, right? Like we already live in that world, but what kind of world do we want to organize? And I think like for me, that's where, kind of like the individual self connects, right? Like with the collective. Oops, sorry,
No
my cat,
worries. No worries.
one of my cats.
No worries, Michelle. Go ahead.
So no, I was saying that I think because of internalized capitalism and all the things that make us hate ourselves, we sometimes we act in ways where it's also oppressive, right, towards ourselves and towards others, right? And as I was saying, like productivity was a huge one for me, just kind of feeling like I needed to always be doing something, and if I wasn't doing something I would feel guilty. um yeah, which reminds me of something that indigenous grandmothers constantly like teach me is, when we talk about corn, right? Like corn as this like sacred foods and like sacred being, right? And there's different like there's a design to corn, and there's different parts of the corn, right? And then I don't remember who told me this exactly, but they were like, you don't have to carry the whole weight of the world in your shoulders. Like you're not the entire cord. I'm sorry. Like you're just the kernel. You're just like one kernel,
Mhm.
right? But you have to do your healing so that you know what your role is, so that you know how you show up.
I see. Okay. Wow. It really make a lot of sense to me. Thank you so much for that wonderful explanation and for your analogy. So okay. So well, I totally agree with that. I do believe there will we cannot change this world on your own, because I do believe in collective
Mm-hmm.
process. And
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, so this is the
Mm-hmm.
question that I want to give to you, okay, Michelle. So what do you think is the essential of exploring and knowing the idea of radical self-love, even in a common people, in activists, in some radicals, in progressive blocks. So what do you think is overall, what do you think is the essential of having this in an individual?
Could you repeat the question? I lost you for a moment.
Yeah, sure. So once again, uh what do you think is the essential of having of understanding and practicing or exploring the idea of radical self-love for an individual?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's gonna look different, for all of us, right? And I think that for me also goes back to a culture of care, which, you know, for a lot of the work that we do around like mutual aid, right? And like these like core principles of like community and care, I think it goes back to that, a culture of care. Um, And I think that they, right, like again, they intersect. It's not, sure, like I can do my individual work, and for me, my individual work might look like alone time in nature, or it might look like creative expression. I play a lot with nature, and right, it might look like expressing ourselves. That looks different for different people, right? But I think like the core premise is like be like creating spaces of care for ourselves, right? For some people that might look like, staying good with their hydration, right? Like we don't get hydrated enough, right? Or for some people that might look like pleasure, right? There's like huge conversations around like, how are we connecting to our pleasure, which Adrienne Marie Brown talks about this. For some people might look like the spiritual work. That's how some people get their nourishment. So I think it goes back to like this question of how do you get nourished, right? So that then you can help nourish your community. And like how do we create like cultures and I think strategy, right? Sometimes we think of care as like this thing that is like on the side, right? That is not part of the core strategy, where it needs to be part of the core strategy, right? Like what are our cultures of care? What is, for example, um, like inner spaces? How are we creating that? Are we taking enough breaks? Do we have like a after plan for when we do actions, right? Or when there's like very like traumatic things happening, right? And so yeah, and then I think the other question is, this culture of care, like who's doing that, right? Because are we still putting that in the backs of women and femmes, right? Non-binary people, right? Like who are we putting that in the shoulders of if it's not part of our DNA as a movement and as a community? Um, so yeah, so I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what it makes me think of.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's just like strategies of care and a culture of care.
All right. Wow, that's wonderful, Michelle. Thank you so much for sharing that again, for sharing your perspective. Okay, so before we end this, this podcast, because we only have limited time. I wish we have more time, to do
Yeah.
this. But anyway, Michelle, can you share some of your practices? How you practice as an individual the idea of radical self love. Can you share something of your daily practices or back practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually just want to say that, my passion for care and like radical self-love also comes from a place of, there was a moment in my life where I was doing like so much that I burnt out. Like my body was really tired. I was just like fatigued all the time, tired all the time, right? So now I understand it better, right? So there's like the trauma, right? Like we carry these like systemic traumas, like migrating, like right, like our identities being attacked or people's being attacked, all these things, right? So that's like systemic trauma, or how I understand it. Um, and then there's like the trauma that there's also like the trauma that is interacting with not caring for ourselves. So anyway, just saying that, there was a time that I was just doing a lot of things without, like getting that nourishment like back to myself. Um, so that put me in a place where I really have to take things more slowly,
Hmm.
you know, that put me in a place of like challenging my boundaries, right? So I wanted to say yes to everything, but you can't. Yeah, you can't.
And I think that's one of the best articulation that you have.
Yeah. So, just like my boundaries with movement and like family and partners and friends and community. Um, right. I think that I um yeah, so one of the things that I've been doing is also like somatic practices. So like, like going back to my body, right? Like what is my body telling me so that I'm not in my mind all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um and another one has also been like kind of having like people in your community where you can be like emotionally like connected, and you have a safe space with someone to like share your emotions. And I'm smiling because I'm so bad about like dumping my traumas on Facebook. I think like sometimes we just want to like share like what we're feeling.
Yeah, exactly. I
um
totally get you. Mm-hmm.
but has also looked like having like a safe, partner, safe community partner that can help you, kind of like process these things. Definitely like sleeping. I feel like we don't sleep enough. And I get everybody's different, but just like remembering to rest. Um, Let me see what else. I think just, there's a huge part of being kind to yourself,
Well,
you
yeah.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and just kind of I've also been like, practicing gratitude with myself and saying, okay, like, this is like what was done today, right? Like also, be grateful to yourself and like others. Um And then I mentioned that I love to play with nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's like different things from like gardening, right? But connecting with plants, I love to connect with plants and um, and like take selfies with plants. A lot of the times people think that I'm taking selfies, right? Like feeling myself, sure. But what I've learned is that the plants also want to be seen,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, just like connecting with plants and like singing to them and just, doing that kind of thing. And yeah, I'm a person that loves affection, and love, and who doesn't? So also a huge lesson has been like asking for what I need, you know sometimes we don't tell each other what we need, but with my close friends it's like, okay, like I need affection right now. you know so I think it's just those things, those
All
like
right.
core things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Michelle, again. And I
Yeah.
do believe everyone needs affection. And yeah, I think I really like the idea that you shared that sometimes, we need to let, we should do, what our body wants to do, and not, and
Mhm.
not the mind what's telling on us. Because, even me, I have my own experience that I'm thinking a lot. I really want to do a lot of things.
Mhm. Mhm.
But sometimes, if you will allow yourself, to do what your mind's telling you, then you'll get exhausted,
Mhm.
and I think that's not helpful anymore, uh,
Mhm.
for your body, okay, or for you as an individual.
Mhm.
So yeah, I I totally agree with that, Michelle. Thank you so
Mhm.
much for sharing that. So okay, so Michelle, before what, I learned a lot of things from this discussion, and there's so much things that need to articulate after this call. But anyway, Michelle, before we end this program, do you have any message for our audience, regarding to this topic, radical self-love?
Yeah, thank you for the space. And I feel like all of us are in our own journey, you know, and I think that is like normalizing that journey, and that journey is going to look different for everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of like remembering that, you know, as I said earlier, that these like practices, these radical self-love, these like strategies of care, you know, that's also what we're putting into the world that we want to build, right? And the world that we're imagining, you know, where we're taking care of the earth and each other and ourselves, right? So what I'm saying is like, just I feel like it's okay to normalize this, you know, as one of our core values. And yeah, it's just like putting that in our work, in our collective, you know, ecological movement DNA. um and it's okay to love yourselves, you know,
I agree.
like, yeah, yeah, there's a lot there. There's 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 a lot there. There's a lot there. It's layered, but you know, I think we're just walking each other home, you know, when we like let go of these layers and like heal all these layers that, you know, these oppressive systems have put on us. And when we let go of those layers, then, you know, you get to like your true self, and you know, we get to walk each other home, whatever that means.
Okay, wonderful. And I do agree with that. Thank you so much for that, Michelle.
Thank
All
you.
right, so one more thing before we end this program, Michelle, because I fully understand that you're doing a lot of groundworks, from your end. Okay, I know that you have a lot of initiative coming from your end. So, for the audience, if there's someone else, who would like to support your work, can you tell us, how they can support, how can they support you, or how can they support your works?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. So I would say like the easiest way is just to follow me on Facebook, and then also Instagram. I do a lot of, you know, more of the artistic work, self-expression work on Instagram. So I think we can, you know, post that. And yeah, just to uplift something that I'm supporting now, it's a food sovereignty and food security fundraising campaign for the Chorti Indigenous people in Guatemala. So we're raising funds as well. So, you know, that's one of the initiatives that if people want to support, I think we can also like post it. I can post it, you know, in the comments. So yeah, I think just, you know, Facebook, Instagram, and then, yeah, and then just like uplifting, you know, this campaign that we're working on with our comrades in Guatemala.
Wonderful. And I would like to send my solidarity, for that campaign and for all your work. And thank you so much, for all the work you've done, Michelle. Okay, I salute
Yeah.
you and thank you so much for doing that. And of course, Michelle, thank you so much for the time that you spent tonight. I so much appreciate your, the time, the effort, and I so much appreciate all the, all the things that you share today, the perspective. I learned a lot, and just like on the other day, uh, there's a lot of articulation that need to be taken tonight. So once again, Michelle, thank you so much, and
Thank
I hope
you.
there will this will not be the first and the last. Okay, I do
No,
promise.
no.
So yeah, so once again, well, once again, this is Ja Realidad. Thank you so much again, Michelle. Okay,
Thank you, Ja.
please support Michelle on for her works. Just I will put that on the comment section, or on the caption, your FB account, your
Mhm,
IG, and the
mhm,
other information about the campaign that you're doing right now. So for
mhm.
all those who want to support Michelle, please contact her directly. Okay. So that's it. Thank you so much, Michelle, and have a good one.
You
Okay.
too. Thank you,
Solidarity.
Ja. Solidarity. Thank you.
You are listening to MadEarth Podcast, a broadcast that will bring anything connected from the land. Brought to you by Pirate Studio.